Welcome to module 18 of object oriented analysis and design. Starting from the last module, we have taken up the task of doing an exploratory exercise to design our leave management system. So, we will continue on that task over this module as well. So, as I had advised in the last module 2, please keep the document of the LMS specification, the PDF handy, keep the video handy. If you need clarifications, please watch the video again, and please also keep pen and paper with you, so that you can pause in between and complete parts of design that I am discussing in this module. So, here we will primarily again quickly recap what we did, how much part of the design has been done. Primarily the identification of classes and their attributes have been done, and based on that this particular module will focus on the identification of responsibilities. And as we had been doing in the last module, we will continue to do periodic quality checks to make sure that we are actually refining it for the better. So, just to remind that our input is the English specification, informal English description, and we are trying to make the class attributes and responsibilities. So, this is just for a recap again, that this is a kind of specification that we are following. You already know this. Now, in the earlier module, we have followed primarily a linguistic approach for analyzing the English description based on that identification of nouns, and we have done that analysis. We have identified a whole lot of nouns, of the order of 50 different nouns. This is possibly the complete list. There may be few more which you may be able to identify, and then analyzing as to which nouns just occur as values. We identified some of the attributes. Of course, there are a lot more attributes which need to be completed by you, and we with all this after the stages, we did a quick quality check to see that the coupling in the system is still low, because it is all disintegrated kind of. Some kind of cohesion has started coming up in terms of similar items which we are putting down in terms of classes, and sufficiency is not clear, and completeness and primitiveness is also very low. And with that we identified about 15 potential classes. There would be more, but these are the potential classes. These are the key abstractions which stood out from amongst the different nouns that we had analyzed. Now, having said that, now we move on to the identification of responsibility, and we will continue with the linguistic analysis approach, and this time we will focus on the verbs to do our task. So, it will be like this, that we will use the linguistic analysis and try to extract verbs, and naturally verb, as we can understand, verb inherently gives a sense of action. It is a sense of something being done. So, verbs like nouns have more strong correlation with existential realities, and therefore, are more indicative of objects and classes. Verbs would be more indicative of actions, but there would be exceptions. In some cases, verb may actually stand for a connective, may actually mean a property, and so on. But primarily from the verbs which we will try to see is what operations can be executed by a certain object. We already have made a good understanding of the possible objects by the identification of classes, and we will try to take into account from the analysis of verbs as to whether there is reusability, that is, if the same action or very similar verbs are repeated amongst various different agents, then those are potential places for reusability which we would like to identify. We will try to see that naturally actions mean events. We talked about events for structural clustering also, you will remember, while we were analyzing the classes for the classes. So, the event is some happening. So, we will expect that with the identification of verb, we will be more clearly able to talk about what events are expected and when those events will happen and so on. We will the verb naturally in many cases will have a subject and an object in the linguistic sense, in the grammatical sense. So, from the object of a verb we would be able to understand, we will be able to extract what is the expected object of the OOAD sense on which the verb is, the action is actually being taken. So, we will get idea about responses, the events raised in turn and so on. So, the analysis of verbs should give us quite a bit of good hold over what can happen in the system. So, like before we just colorize the text, this time I am using the blue color to identify the verbs. So, the company wants to manage the attendance and leave of its employees through SMS. This is a verb, but we would simply ignore that because we understand this is just a verb for expression, not for the system. But here is a verb which has a specific subject of employee, the verb work, then report, again report, then there is approval, approve, there is regret, again report, approve and so on. So, in this way you can see, like in the case of noun, we can identify several verbs that will be of use in terms of the identification of responsibility. Continuing on the document further, if we go towards the part where leave, different kinds of leaves are discussed, we can say that we see a verb credited. So, we will know that leaves will have something to do with the credit system. It has something to do with the joining, another verb. Allocation is prorated. So, there is another verb that defines action. Carried over or carry forward will be is another verb, and we can see that there is some qualification in terms of that. So, when we analyze verbs, we can actually see that what is the primary verb and what are the auxiliary ones. The primary is the carryover and the auxiliary is cannot be, which basically is a negative action that is being said. So, we can make a note of this, all of these are of that kind, and if you go through, you will be able to identify many of them in the whole document. So, I hope you have understood again as to what we are trying to do in terms of analyzing the parts of speech. So, I would strongly suggest that you pause at this point and go back to the PDF specification and go through it very carefully, this time analyzing the verbs and connecting them in your notebook. So, I hope you have done this exercise of collecting the verbs. This is the list of the verbs identified from the LMS specification. Again, I would never claim this to be an exhaustive list. You may be able to find some more verbs that I have missed out, but this is more or less the kind of verbs that you get. So, there is interesting verb like approve, like regret, like adjust, and there are a lot of as I said is auxiliary combined verbs, the negative actions, and certainly verbs which are kind of more connective like become and provide, these kind of. So, all kinds of verbs actually come in as you do the analysis, and you will also find that there are certain verb forms which are not in the pure form like these ones. So, the verb, the pure original verb is the club, then it is coming with an auxiliary extension. So, what we will do just to clean up the system and reduce the number of verbs that we have to deal with, we will try to just take the pure form and take the list of verbs which are in the unique in terms of their stem. So, if we do that cleanup, then we are left with these kind of verbs, on which again we can try to look at that, look into a couple of different things, like what are the verbs that we observe in very core part of the action. So, maybe I could just take a look at the specification here. So, if we look at this, then suppose if I am looking into, suppose I am looking into these leave parts, and we can see that the verbs like the leave is credited, ELV is saying it is credited. So, we get SLVC is credited. So, you can see that is credited as a verb, or the credit verb has something strong to do in terms of the different leave, which is understandable, because you need to have some entitlement for the leave. Then but some of them may be relatively less important verb, like here we are saying that maximum 15 days of negative balance is allowed. Now, this is not, this is, though this is a verb, but you will have to be careful that in the usage here, this is more a constraint than an action. Since you have to express everything here in English, you are writing it in terms of naturally subject, predicate, object and verb and all that, but this is not actually an action of an agent. This is you would not perceive an action here, rather this 15 days negative balance is allowed is more like a constraint that we will need to get into the system. Whereas we could look into some of the other verbs like clubbed. We can see that here in CL, we can see that here in EL, we can see that here in SL and so on. So, all that I am meaning is, in fact, like if we if I just scroll down further in maternity also, we again I'm sorry, your underlinings will change, because here the underline is actually on the display panel, but you can see that the clubbed also exists in maternity. So, we can certainly conclude from here that club is a verb which has a more of importance, more of relation to the core responsibility and dynamics of the system. So, that is what I was trying to point out here. That is what I was trying to point out in terms of the list of verbs that we have here. So, from this list we will need to try to primarily identify in the manner that we were doing as to what are the more important, more relevant verbs for the situation that we have. And we will have to obviously keep this in mind, that our core responsibility here is to prepare a leave management system. So, that by the basic definition of the problem, most of the actions that are either initiated by leave kind of objects, or where leave kind of objects are a participant, certainly has more importance and will have to be looked into in greater detail. Okay. So, with this let us move on. Let us now try to put these verbs with the classes that we already have the classes identified. At least we have a reasonable number of classes identified. So, what I am trying to do is actually analyze the document and trying to associate the class with the verbs that can get related to it. So, this will mean that if my statement says that say if my statement says for example, here that it says that the employee who work. So, that will that relates these two together. We say executive reports. So, that relates these two together. We say lead who approves. So, that relates these two together. So, this is the kind of relationships that we are trying to set forth. We already know the nouns corresponding to the classes that we have identified, that is how we got them, and we are identifying the verbs, and from the verbs we will now try to annotate on this relationship to get a better idea of what the responsibilities could be. So, we do this identification of work, record, request, cancel, check, report, and all these are the verbs associated with employee, whereas the verbs associated with leave will be credit, that is crediting leave, prorating leave, getting a leave approved, and so on and so forth. So, if we just refine that, then these verbs we can now think of them as responsibilities, and you will see that some of these I am marking in blue, especially these ones, because we know that there are multiple categories of employees, and if you analyze on the document, you will find that these are the responsibilities, or these are the relations that have been mentioned for all kinds of employees, whereas maybe this is approve or regret is relatively restricted. Maybe it just applies to lead or manager, but does not apply to executive. So, in terms of generalization, I will say that these are the more important responsibilities, more common responsibilities that we identify, and we will try to put them together with the classes that we have. So, this now brings us to the abstraction summary of our linguistic analysis. So, we will say that we have key actions, report, request, approve. These are the key actions. So, these are the verbs or responsibilities that we have identified, and then we are trying to say that what is core key and what possibly is just a supportive one. Let me just again go back to this and try to show you. Maybe I can pick up some parts from the second page, because I have always I am always discussing the first page. So, we say that here the specification is saying these are the typical use cases, which means that a use case is a term which tell us that how typically a user will actually use this system, what are the different scenarios actually through which he or she will use the system. So, if we look in here, we will be able to see more of the association between the object and the responsibility. So, if we look at for example, here say every employee of every kind can do the following from his or her account. So, that clearly relates to these are the different responsibilities that you have. Now, we are saying that of all this we are trying to mark that these the responsibilities of say record, request, cancel, avail, these we are saying are more key abstractions. These are key responsibilities in contrast to some of the others. So, let us understand why are we saying so. Let me again scroll up. Suppose here let us read the leave. We are saying that CL cannot be carried forward, CLs cannot be clubbed. Then say ELs can be carried forward, carried over. Then it says it can be clubbed. This says SL can be clubbed. So, if we look into these clubbed as a responsibility, now naturally it will go to a responsibility of the leave class, of the leave object, but this is we would say it is more appears like a more an auxiliary responsibility, because this is a responsibility which will again not have a primary action in the system, which as it turning out very loud and clear is that employees apply for leave, they the leave may be approved, they may be regretted and so on, and then if approved they avail of it, they can cancel and all that. In comparison to that, these are also responsibilities, and they are responsibilities of certainly the leave class, and these responsibilities will possibly lead to refinement of the leave class. This will possibly lead to different refinements in the class structure that we have. It will possibly impose more constraints, and that is the reason we will try to make this distinction and try to differentiate between what are the key actions and what are the non-key actions. So, that is I just discussed this to explain that why we are putting this in the non-key one and why these are the key actions that you have. And besides that, you may have a lot of auxiliary actions like something has to be performed and so on, which are basically not part of the core system, but is coming across because you need to finally express the whole thing in a English like language. So, with that if we take back, then somewhat at a very early level, our design could look something like this. We already knew that there are several classes and employee is a class, and if we look into the exercise, these are different attributes which are specified somewhere in the document for an employee: name, personal details, designation, employee code, login ID. These came up through the analysis of extraction of noun, then it went through the process of categorization, classification as attributes. So, we have these attributes, and these are the different responsibilities that we are being able to identify in terms of the analysis of verbs, and then associating them, as I showed, with the actual employee class. So, we have a collection of verbs, we have the employee classes, and we can associate them based on what has occurred in the document where. So, this is a kind of the employee class with attributes and responsibilities. Similarly, we have executive, we have lead, we have manager, all of these you need similar things to be done. So, I will leave this to you, and I will again advise that it may be a good option to just do a pause and try to work this out for the other kinds of categories of employees as to what their attributes should be and what their responsibilities, how their responsibilities turn out to be. Going forward in later modules, we will actually use that information and do different refinements of the design. This is just another example of the leave class with the attributes of the leave, like type of leave, start date, duration of leave, and so on, and other responsibilities like validity check, accounting, clubbability, all these will come up. And again, I will request you to actually work out on the leave objects and try to, for all the set of classes, please try to complete the attributes and the responsibilities, so that you have a good hold in terms of the basic defining entities of the whole system. Quick time for a quality check again. So, if we look into what we have primarily added the responsibilities here. So, we have not again yet analyzed the interpretation of the classes in terms of the responsibilities, which will what we would like to do in the next couple of modules. So, since we have not yet done that, so what there is not much that we expect to change in terms of the coupling and cohesion metrics. They remain to be at the same place, but my feeling was that we have slowly inching towards completeness. We are still very low, but at least we have completed one aspect of the system, that for all classes we have identified the attributes and the responsibilities. So, at a certain level we have a basic notion about the system dynamics, though we have not yet looked at relationships, we have not yet analyzed how those relationships will impact the overall organization of the system. We have some idea emerging for the sufficiency as well. So, our next target would certainly be to explore different association, different relationships amongst the classes, within the classes, so that we can infer more information about the design. So, in summary, in this module we have analyzed how we can identify classes and its attributes and responsibilities from an informal English description. We have primarily in this module and in the earlier one, we have primarily used a linguistic analysis approach, which is one way of doing it. Certainly, there are several other ways that this analysis can be done, but what has been important is we have shown that at every stage it is critical to go back to the specification and also measure as to how well you are doing in terms of the metric, in terms of checking out how the different quality parameters are doing, and then come back and refine that. In continuation, we will continue this exploratory exercise, and then next module we will explore the relation and hierarchy within the classes.